Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Your hosts, Joseph and Michelle Whalen, a husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics, are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom.
Welcome to Insights into Entertainment. This is episode 139, a whole new show. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my energized and revitalized co-host, Michelle Whalen.
Hi there.
How you doing today, dear?
I guess I'm okay.
So we have been talking about making a change to the show format for quite some time now.
Yes, we have.
I wanted to wait until we got to a more momentous number. I thought 139 was kind of rather obscure, but that's fine, I guess.
That's what we're all about, being obscure.
Right. That's our theme, right?
Right.
So when we started the podcast, it was originally meant to be a deep dive into selected entertainment news and pop culture information that, being diehard fans of a number of these key areas of these topics, we thought we could lend some unique perspective on. Well, over the course of 130 episodes or so, we kind of drifted away from that into more of a reporting on current news and events with a little bit of commentary mixed in. So our hope is to get back into our original purpose, starting with this episode. We'll highlight a couple of significant events in the entertainment and pop culture worlds from a more deep dive perspective and less from a reporting perspective. And in today's episode, we're going to take a look at some interesting finds from the Disney Animation Research Library. Then we'll digest some of the feedback from the opening of the Galactic Star Cruiser experience in Disney World. That'll be our Star Wars segment, in case folks at home didn't know that.
Just in case you were wondering.
It's not meant to be two Disney stories back to back. This isn't a dedicated Disney podcast.
Right.
We'll also mark the 50th anniversary of one of the most iconic film franchises in movie history before we take a look at our experience at Nerdfest this past weekend with a little bit of video footage. Before we do that, though, I would invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Entertainment. Video versions and audio, we're publishing both on our Insights into Things podcast now. And you can find both of those listed on Google, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon. It's important to kind of point out the reason that we do a separate audio one is there are certain certain podcast feeds that don't do hybrid video and audio, Spotify being one of those, but there's a few others. So if we did just the hybrid, we couldn't get listed on Spotify, so we have to do just an audio for
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Spotify. We would also invite you to write into us, give us your feedback, tell us what you like, what you don't like, give us your conventions and shows you'd like us to plug. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We are on Twitter at insights_things. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a monitor that's blank on one side. I'm trying to figure out why. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. We're on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings. Or you can find links to all those and much more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. Shall we get started?
Sure.
So what's our first thing to talk about today?
So the first thing actually came from The Nerdist, and this was actually an article that was from a couple of years ago, but it was interesting enough to talk about because it's an area of Disney that not a lot of people know about, and it's something that's actually not open to the public, but for this event that they had, they actually allowed some reporters in. So that was kind of how the story came to be. So recently, again, well, it wasn't recently, it was back in 2017, the Disney Animation Research Library, known as the ARL, opened its doors for a group of reporters. They were going to be viewing some original art from Pinocchio during the visit. It was the special 80th anniversary of Pinocchio. They were going to be re-releasing it onto Blu-ray at the time, and so that was why they had this event. So the Disney Animation Research Library is housed in a nondescript building in the vicinity of near Disney's Los Angeles studios. So inside its doors, it's temperature-controlled vaults, and it's basically a treasure trove of animation history. So there are things from sketches, things that are on paper, things that are even written on napkins that are in this whole archived area. And of course, like I had said, it's not accessible to the public, but they open their doors to reporters to celebrate the home release of Pinocchio. So as the tour was going on, in the article there, you see all these different departments and all these different areas, and they had laid out a whole area of different artwork from just Pinocchio. And what was interesting was, this was original stuff. This was from like 1940, 80-year-old, pieces of paper. And what's, because, excuse me, because of the sensitivity of it, you have to wear it. They don't even want you touching it, but anybody that's handling it, it's just like any other archivist artifacts, wearing the white gloves and being very careful with it. And what was interesting was to see certain scenes that weren't in the movie, that there was a whole musical number that they had wanted to do, but because of timing, they didn't add it to the movie, but they have all this original artwork for it, that they've still, held on to. So, during the tour, they were talking about what the purpose, was and the processes that they go through. And it's, obviously the research library, it's mostly about preservation. Their collection includes 65 million pieces in 11 different vaults. So that's from drawings, concept art, cells, backgrounds, maquettes, and even puppets from like The Nightmare Before Christmas are included. They have things going all the way back to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and obviously even, the current movies as well. There's stuff there. So what's interesting is, back in the day, most studios threw out items once a movie was completed, but thankfully not Walt Disney. He saved a lot of his work so that the artists, and what's interesting is they actually started calling it the morgue, where all these past projects were. But the idea was that his artists would be able, if they needed inspiration or they needed to see something, they basically had their own research library to go back and look through. Now, one of the things that most Disney fans know is that back in the day, Walt actually used to give away certain pieces of art if you went to Disneyland. If, Walt happened to be there on a day when you were visiting and you were walking through the park, you might actually get an original cell from a movie. So it's kind of funny how certain things were kind of given away.
So is this something where are they just responsible for preserving what they have, or do they try to reclaim some of these things that got out into the public domain?
Well, in the article, they don't mention anything about that, and there's actually a video that they had done a live stream of a tour of it. So they don't talk about trying to get anything back, but a lot of what they do is they are trying to digitalize a lot of it. But also what they're doing, too, is in most cases in the preservation of it, they're not trying to fix anything. So if there's any sort of mistake on something, they're keeping that original mistake in it.
Okay.
They did say if it was something where it was going to be a re-release of something, they might go in if there was like a coffee stain or a cigarette stain or something. That would be the only thing that they would really kind of clean up, but everything else they wanted to leave it as is.
So now you had mentioned that the public obviously doesn't have general access to this. Do they pull these items out to take them on tour at any point?
And that's one of the things that they talked about, is that they do from time to time for special events or things, things will kind of be on loan that'll go out. So I was thinking when we went to the one Faniversary event. Now, granted, that wasn't... So this is all animation stuff. So this isn't even the live action movie. But we know that they have their own area for all of that stuff as well, because the different shows that have come out on Disney Plus talk about it, and that's where you find the different collectors who have this and that. And where when we went to Faniversary, they had Mary Poppins' hat.
Right.
And that was something, nobody could touch it. It was only handled by one person, and he was wearing the white gloves. So that's something that's in a different vault. So
to that end, I have to assume that when this material was originally created in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it was never intended to be created with the idea of preserving it.
Right.
So do they take... is there a scientific process they go through that they treat these things differently? Like, how do they preserve that stuff that wasn't intended to be preserved?
Well, and that's the thing is, I guess the idea... You have to figure, going back, so many years, Walt was really the first person to say, hey, let's hold on to some of this stuff. This might, be useful for us. So, you figure it was probably preserved, in some way, but nothing like what they would have now. And I'm guessing, they never thought, oh, we're going to digitize this, or we're going to,
So is that one of the techniques that they use? Are they actually taking the material they have now and digitizing it for public consumption?
Right, and that's what they're doing with a lot of stuff, just so that they can have it just as a backup to something, because obviously paper can only last so long, and the idea is obviously they try not to touch certain things over and over and over again, so a lot of the stuff stays in the vault, unless it needs to come out, or a certain artist can request to see certain things. So it's basically an insider's library.
Did they talk anything about the process of like, for instance, they're going through and creating live action versions of a lot of the animated films.
Right.
So did they happen to talk anything about how the artists are actually going back and accessing this information to inspire the new stuff?
They didn't mention that, and I'm sure that that's probably something that they are doing, to be able to go back and maybe even find scenes. Again, they talk about in Pinocchio, the one scene excuse me, that they were showing, that they were that they had laid out, was something that pretty much nobody in the public had ever seen before. So I'm sure with some of these other animated movies, there's probably some inspiration that these movie makers are getting from looking at some of the original art, but it doesn't talk about that in this article.
So I'm gonna run the slideshow we have of the art itself.
Sure. when you think of how much.
So obviously they did this because of the Pinocchio event.
Right.
Have they opened this up in the past before? Are they planning on doing it again?
In this article, it doesn't mention anything about it. It sounded like it was kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. But again, it's been a number of years since this article came out. And, being members, having a Disney Plus subscription, there's a lot of these different collectible shows that have come up and documentary-type shows about the parks and about the movies and about certain animations. So I have a feeling it's one of those things where, maybe every now and then they'll kind of,
right,
let a little bit out, kind of like with, Skywalker.
Sure.
With that, with Lucasfilm, they don't do tours, but every now and then something comes up where they, open it up.
Speaking of tours, so they're going through the process of digitizing all this stuff.
Right.
Have they made any kind of digital tour available or anything like that online available?
Well, the only thing that was available, at the end of the article, there is a YouTube video. And what was interesting was it was actually when the tour was being filmed, it was actually live streamed. So Disney Parks was live streaming this. And basically, I don't know if he was the head or he's like the top curator. He was the one that was giving the tour and kind of like, hey, and this is, this department and this is this department. And people could actually type their questions and he was answering live questions as it was going on. So it's kind of interesting. So they haven't done anything since then, but to be able, you can go and watch the video now and learn about the area. And they talk about how, we're not open to the public, so this is a very rare opportunity to be able to enjoy.
So I assume it's more of an archival type of facility rather than a museum type of facility then. Okay.
Yeah, it's really
interesting.
Their own research library, which,
And you said this is just the animation portion.
This is just the animation.
This is how much resources they've got dedicated just for that.
65 million pieces of artwork. And like I said, I had always heard, that Walt would hand out cells. So could you imagine all the stuff that he gave away?
Right.
And you figure they probably didn't save everything from the movie. They probably, saved a good portion of it. And, so how much would it have been if they had saved everything? And even when you look at, so I don't know, was it 2 years ago, I guess, maybe? There was a documentary that they did on Disney Plus, and it was for Frozen 2 and the whole process that they had. And again, nowadays the modern movies are 90% digital.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff that gets printed out or whatever, and you see them going through like their dailies, and they have, this pile of scenes, and we're scrapping this, and they just throw it out.
And
now.
That's the thing, like even scripts, you may go through multiple revisions of scripts before you get to your final script, and those edits are happening,
on the fly
during shooting. Right. So even like a sheet that's thrown away from that, would certainly be worth a find.
Right. So just seeing in that, a stack of paper just pew,
yeah.
Like, wow. Yeah.
That's pretty
cool. Yeah, it was
cool.
Like I said, it was an older article, but it was again something that most people don't know about, and kind of an interesting peek behind the curtain, really.
Very cool. Well, we'll come back and we're going to talk about a Star Wars story again, part of which was sourced from the Nerdist. So good resource this week for us.
Yeah.
But we'll be right back. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. So the Halcyon has finally launched to much fanfare. We've talked about the rumors, we've talked about the accommodations and the activities, and most importantly, we've talked about the price. Now people are reporting back their first actual experiences on board the fake Star Cruiser to nowhere, and the reviews are interesting, we'll say. So it's important to note that the first few reviews are primarily from journalists who did not pay an exorbitant fee for the passage on this ridiculously expensive cruise. So we kind of have to take these reports with a bit of a grain of salt. I also have to imagine that the person providing this information was actually required to fork over the $4,000+ for the experience. It might have a different tone to it. So they tend to be a little upbeat, but with the caveat of, hey, I didn't pay for this. So if I didn't have to pay for it, I'd probably like it a lot more too. So one of the first reviews that we digested was from noted pop culture journalist Amy Ratcliffe. And she notes quite appropriately that as a single individual on the cruise, it was impossible to experience everything the Star Cruiser had to offer. And that was one of the probably more disturbing things here, is that they take the same theme with the Star Cruiser that they do with everything else. That, oh, well, there's too much to experience here, and you'll just experience the rest the next time you come back. And it's like, we're not coming back again. Like we mortgaged the house to get here. So you need to give me everything at one shot, because there's just not enough. There's no way we're going to be able to get back to this.
Right, right.
The first not so insignificant feature that you get is free valet parking, which, you know, in light of Disney's more recent nickel and diming tactic of charging resort guests for parking, this is kind of a pleasant surprise. But for $4,000, you really are paying for your valet parking, aren't you?
Right, exactly.
So let's not read too much into that.
Right, exactly.
You also get a themed magic band at check-in, which is one of their big selling points here. And again, I can't consider it free, since obviously that cost is incorporated into the price. Not that I'm saying take these things away and lower the price, because they won't, but
what was interesting was I happened to see, so I have a Disney Facebook friend who just went on it, so he paid for it. He wasn't part of the freebie, and in their little pop-up, you could actually buy a magic band that actually was a little bit more decorative. Okay. But it was after your trip had already finished, which I thought was kind of funny. Right. You would think, oh, well, here's the free one you get. Can I bling it up? No, you have to wait till after you've gotten back. So I thought that was
that's how you had the bragging rights.
Right, exactly. Look what I got. Yeah.
The one thing, there were two articles I dug through on this, and the one thing that came out of both of these that was significant is you need to make sure you have your data pad, essentially your phone. Right. Because so much of what you do is tied to the app with your itinerary and your interactions and translations and scanning and all this stuff. The problem you run into is your phone going to last the entire time?
Right, and that was one of the things I had read also, was make sure you pack multiple battery backups. And I'm kind of surprised that they didn't come up with something for you to use that wasn't your phone. Right. Like some sort of...
Right, like here's a loaner iPad tablet or something like that.
Right, something like that, so that this way... almost so that you couldn't access the outside world.
Right.
Like, in a way, like that.
Right, to kind of isolate you to that and keep you in the experience. Right, to keep you in the
experience. Like, here's something, and that it would link up to other people that you were on the cruise with.
Right.
So that you could kind of mix and mingle, with others if you were going to do any of the adventures.
Sure. So there is they talk about a pre-show that you have when you check in. So you get valet parked, you wind up going into, I guess, a spaceport type thing, and you get kind of your pre-show video to get you into the mood. And from then on, you're on the ship. You're immersed. I don't know. I don't know if I need that kind of... Because usually when Disney does their pre-shows, it's basically to make it more palatable stand in line. So it almost makes me think, okay, all right, they're bringing them in 2s and 3s. We're bringing all these people in. Am I literally just standing here watching this pre-show so I can get into the next room because there's people in there right now? So it kind of makes me think that it's really just Disney's way of throttling the passage into the building itself.
Okay, I could see that.
But this is supposed to kick off your story, so we'll give them a little bit of credit for that. I hope it's just not your typical, snooze fest to keep your hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times.
Right.
So the rooms, okay? So it's worthwhile talking about the rooms. So the journalists themselves did not get to stay in the stateroom suites. They got to stay in the standard rooms, which, as a non-1%er, we probably wouldn't be in the staterooms either.
Right.
So they talk about the fact that you get... the rooms can sleep up to 5. They say it will probably be cramped with 5 in their luggage. But you make the point of how much luggage you're really bringing for a 2-night stay.
Right, because my whole point is if we were going down and we were staying, we would probably leave all the luggage that we didn't need in the car. Now, granted, if you were flying down, that would be a little bit different. I don't know if they have someplace where you can leave your extra luggage. But the other thing, too, is how much time are you spending in your room? You should really only be sleeping and getting ready for the...
Well, you would think, but apparently the room itself is part of the story itself. Right, because there's a terminal that you have there, and the terminal guides you where you have to go, and you get communications.
True.
But the room itself, the standard rooms come with a queen bed, 2 bunk beds, and then there's a pull-down, similar to what we ran into when we stayed at the Contemporary when we were down there. Just a little extra space for one of the kids.
Right.
You get a TV that's themed, that's basically just looks like a Star Wars style screen, but it's basically a regular TV.
Right. I think Disney Plus is included with it because the one person I saw was like, "Ooh, look, Cars 3."
Yeah.
Exists in Star Wars or something. It was kind of, oh, okay.
There's no room service. So that was kind of...
that is weird, because even on a cruise you can still get...
Yeah. So, not sure why. I think maybe they were trying to keep people from spending too much time in their rooms with it.
Maybe. I could see that.
Especially because the venues for getting your food are large. A lot of the story revolves around them.
Right.
The cantina and the restaurant. So they don't want people... sitting in their rooms, I guess, because you're not going to
I wonder if it was something where, at 11 o'clock at night, if you wanted something to eat, could you still get a snack?
They've got snacks that you can go and get at one of the areas do have snacks. We'll talk about that later in the article.
Okay.
You don't get windows, so once you walk into the building, the only place you can see the outside world is either on your excursion to Batu, or they have an environment simulator.
Yes, I did. And it was funny because my friend who was just there, I saw that and went, oh, okay.
An environment simulator. A room with no roof.
So, it was like glass. From the pictures.
Okay.
It looked like, the area, and then it had the glass, and you're like, oh, but that's not real, even though it was real.
Right.
I'm thinking, oh, you have this, but you couldn't do a pool?
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Well, the thing that I thought was neat that they noted about it is you don't get windows, but you get a virtual window.
Yes, so you can see the stars outside.
And what's neat is all the room windows are synced. So if the ship goes into hyperspace, they all wind up going into hyperspace and stuff like that.
So it's not like this room sees this and this room sees it. They all say, okay, that's all right.
The one complaint that they had was at night when you're trying to sleep, it's very bright. So you can put your shields up. So it either turns it off or dims it down so you can actually sleep. So I thought that was interesting.
Interesting.
And there's, like I said, there's an interface in the room for continuing your quests.
Right.
On with the ship's logistics droid is who you're interacting with.
Okay. Right.
So the first dining area they talk about is the Crown of Corellia dining room. This is where all the meals are taken. This is where one of the entertainment venues is.
Right.
From both articles, they said the food was extremely good, which you would expect. I mean, you're looking at it being an upscale restaurant on any of the other resorts. Which, I can never knock Disney for their quality of food. Breakfast and lunch are served buffet style. You can get your blue milk or green milk, just like you can at Galaxy's Edge.
Yep.
Dinner is full service, but it is served family style.
Okay, interesting.
So that was kind of an interesting little take. Light snacks are available in the atrium.
Oh, okay.
But they say, it's nothing to be impressed with.
Okay.
So it's probably the same stuff that you would get at like a fast serve or something like that.
Okay.
They do have grab-and-go breakfast, light snacks at the Sublight Lounge. They said the food's probably higher end with the Star Wars themed names, but it's down to earth stuff. Like we saw, we'll show you a slideshow of some of the pictures, and one of the meals happens to be shrimp. It's just blue.
Right.
So it's nothing crazy. It's very much like what they did at Galaxy's Edge, where the food is just creatively arranged and decorated to look exotic.
Right. The one thing that my friend had posted was a picture. It looked like a green globby thing or whatever, and it was actually it wasn't peanut butter, it was sunflower seed and jelly.
Okay.
So a PB&J. He said it was the most delicious peanut butter and jelly sandwich he had ever had in his entire life. But it just had this weird, it didn't look moldy. It just looked like this green alien thing. Yeah. So, so it's amazing that they're doing all this like artistry, really.
Right.
To, and again, like you were saying, for the food, they'll write what it is, and it's just a normal chicken, whatever, but they just put so much.
Right, and sometimes mac and cheese just looks like mac and cheese.
Right, but not Star Wars mac and cheese. It's, so yeah, just the artistry.
Right, and again, really it's very much like what they did at Galaxy's Edge, so it helps to keep you in that environment.
Yeah.
So no Star Wars experience is complete without a cantina scene, and that is what the Sublight Lounge is. They say it's a great place to meet up with friends at the end of the day, take in a few of the odd and perhaps unsavory characters. The drinks are mixed at the bar, so they're not pre-made like they are. Apparently, if you go into Uga's at Galaxy's Edge, they're all pre-mixed drinks that are in there.
Oh, okay.
These are made right there, so you can have them custom made to your liking, which is nice. Again, you can get the food that's there, but the one big thing is this is where you play cards. So one of the big events that you can do is learn how to play sabacc. They have sabacc tournaments. You can play in those. Apparently, from everything that I've read so far, the kids love playing this more than the adults do.
Okay.
But it wasn't intended for the kids.
Right. It was intended for the adults.
So, be careful if you go. You don't want your kid turning into a compulsive gambler when you get out of there playing cards.
I did also see that there was some sort of bingo that they played as well.
Right. There was one that's an event that's just for the kids.
Right. So it was like, just like on every other cruise, there's bingo.
Right.
So it was kind of interesting to see, the Star Wars version of it. So
Disney bills this as an immersive experience. So my I had two big questions. One, how immersive is it? And two, is it worth the cost? We'll get to the cost. But how immersive is it? So they say that once you board the Star Cruiser, you're in your favorite galaxy far, far away. At least that's how the staff treats you. And we sort of encountered this in Galaxy's Edge too, where they don't have references to the rest of the parks. They don't have references to the real world stuff. But it kind of fell apart a little bit in Galaxy's Edge.
Right.
This is their chance to redeem that and try to pull it all back together again.
Right.
So if you come in from Earth, they treat you like you're an alien. You know, they recommend that you come in with an in-universe backstory and immerse yourself in that backstory. As far as, you know, you can dress up, you can come in from, I'm from Alderaan. Well, you really can't be at this point in time because it's just rocks now.
Yeah.
But
my family's originally from Alderaan.
There you go. See?
But we moved to Tatooine.
But they encourage you that, and they try to stoke that as you go through.
Okay.
You'll get some unobtrusive history lessons while you're there from the cast members. A lot of it's just talked about as being ad hoc, where you'll run into a cast member who's doing something, and they'll give you a history lesson of something on the ship. They faithfully remain in character. At least they did on this press tour. So again, it's one of those. I don't know how they're going to deal with real world stuff. The people in the press were kind of given instructions on what they can and can't do and type stuff. But as soon as you open that up to the regular public, you're going to get all kinds of strange interactions.
And I guess you have to kind of, if you're paying for this, no, you know, and obviously we'll get more into the cost, but I would think you'd want, you know, you're spending all that money to do this.
But there are circumstances that occur that they even mention in the articles that we'll get to that may pull you, or certainly me, out of character. So they talk about the fact that the story flows through your phone. So you got to make sure you have that with you all the time. Make sure you bring extra batteries. You can interact with some of the face characters through the app, but they're canned responses. It's not like they're typing text back to you or anything like that. And then when you interact with them in person, they're not going to realize
that you just message them or anything.
So it's sort of like playing a role-playing game where they know what the script is, but they don't know where in the script you are. So you may know things or have done things, and they're not aware of it yet. So when you interact with them, it's kind of disjointed, is how it's been described.
I could see that.
They also say the app is very software-driven, so there's lots of bugs in it. So they're still working a lot of bugs out.
Well, you figure it's only been a couple of weeks, so...
A couple of biggest problems, you get repeated messages, the same messages over and over, and you get messages out of sequence, which, from a story standpoint, that could be jarring to understand. You know, you got a message that you shouldn't have gotten for 3 messages in, and you know, spoilers, confusion, and so forth. The itinerary, the immersion is very itinerary driven, but they say itinerary changes based on the missions you pick up. So when you get there, there's a couple of missions you just get by default. But there's a whole ton of side missions that you can do depending on who you interact with and what you scan and all that stuff. So the advantage that they say here is that, well, the next time you come back, you can have a completely different experience. For $4,000, I'd expect a completely different experience when I come back. I mean, you're not giving me something that's a selling point.
Right. They really should be marketing this as this is a once in a lifetime thing. You might never come back.
Right. From all accounts, it seems like some of the story is kind of forced down your throat. And we'll talk about that later when you get to Galaxy's Edge and how the missions continue there, and you might not even be aware of it. None of the things that you do impact the outcome of the voyage or your trip or anything. So you make all these choices, you feel like you're involved, and the same thing happens at the end of the day no matter what. So to me, when it comes to an MMO online game and I'm playing through that story and my choices don't matter, it's very frustrating for me.
I could see that.
Because why did I make these choices in the first place? So the one thing they do tell you is that the crew is trying to accommodate so many guests at once. So each of those guests are at a different stage in their story. So you may go to a cast member to try to interact with them to advance a quest, and they may be interacting with someone else who's earlier in that quest, further in that quest, on a different quest, and you have to wait your turn to interact with them. They say sit there and listen because what they tell them might be relevant to what you say.
Okay.
But this is where I could see people getting frustrated quickly because you're trying to do everything at once. And if I have to sit here and wait for 5 people to talk to this guy before I can get to him,
I could have gone and done something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got 2 days here, and I'm wasting my time trying to talk to someone to advance. This is where I would get frustrated and come out of character at that point in time. So
Okay.
that's what I'm saying. There's situations where even a diehard like me who can go in there and be in character will get frustrated, and you kind of have to have patience with these things. They kind of target that towards the kids more than the adults, but the adults are the ones that are paying for this. So the adults are the ones that are going to want to be satisfied.
And I guess it really also depends on your level of fandom, too.
Absolutely.
Are you just doing
if
this
you're
to
not a fan, you're not going to this, I don't think. Who's going to spend $4,000? Your daughter. She hates Harry Potter. She would never spend $4,000 to go to Universal Studios and go to Harry Potter. She just wouldn't.
Right.
No matter how cool it is.
Right.
So you got to be a fan at some level to do this.
Right. But again, going back to my friend who was just there, people asked, "Oh, did you do a lot of the quests?" No, not really. He was really going just to kind of, like for, and he doesn't have...
Well, and that's what I would do. I would go for the immersion and a nice leisurely walk through 1 or 2 of the stories, and that's it. I don't want to go there and it be a job to have to do everything at once. That's not what I want.
And I'm sure for the kids, it's more so, I got to do this quest, and I want to do all the quests where the parents are probably, so what drink are we trying today in the lounge?
Absolutely. So how about a rent-a-shuttle?
Okay.
So everyone's heard there's an excursion to Batu, which is Galaxy's Edge at Hollywood Studios.
Right.
This is accomplished via a box truck.
Yep.
No, really.
Yeah.
It's a box truck.
Yep. But it looks really cool on the inside.
You never see the exterior, so you don't know you're in a box truck.
Right.
But they decorate up the inside, and that's how they transport you the short distance over to the thing. I thought that was interesting. So you do get Lightning Lane access to the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run and Rise of the Resistance, which, again, very generous for Disney to do that. However, part of your mission on the ship are tied to these rides.
Okay.
It was unclear how obvious they made that aware to the people.
Okay.
Because just by going on the rides, you complete those missions.
Okay.
One happens to be stealing coaxium or smuggling coaxium for someone or something like that. But you don't need to know that because they try to integrate it into the story ride itself. But the story ride itself is the same story ride as when it launched, which had nothing to do with the Halcyon.
Right, right.
So it's kind of quirky how they kind of tie that in. They also say that you can stop by Uga's, but you don't get a reservation automatically. It's not included. And they do tell you to let someone from the cruise know that you're there. And it was unclear why. It's almost like they try to keep you on a very strict regiment while you're there, and Uga's is not included in that.
Well, I'm guessing because you're only there for so long a period of time, and they probably don't want you wandering off to other areas of the park, because you have to get back to your shuttle to get back to the ship by a certain time. I'm guessing maybe that's, because I'm guessing probably most people go on their 2 rides, maybe walk around a little bit, and then head back to the ship because there's other things.
Right, because you're paying to be on the ship. You're not paying to be at Galaxy's Edge.
Right, right.
But the last shuttle back to the ship is 4 o'clock. So they take you in shifts there, and then you can come back as you need to.
Right.
So you're one of the earlier ones there. You literally can spend the whole day there if you want to.
Right.
Whether or not you do or not is up to you. So how about the activities? Every cruise isn't complete without activities. So there's a few activities that show up on your schedule automatically. These you don't have much control over. It's like orientation, bridge orientation, lightsaber training, stuff like that. I'm not sure I like them just sticking stuff on my itinerary and making me do them. That's fine, Some of the activities were kind of lackluster. They talked about the bridge training where they sit you down and you do something at a console itself. They said it was very similar to flying the Falcon. You had one thing, push this button over and over, or lift this lever, or whatever it is. So you weren't really doing anything, nor did it have any real effect on the ship itself. So it was a very isolated experience.
Okay.
Other things that they talk about don't show up on your itinerary, and that's through interactions with different people around the ship, different cast members and stuff like that. So they said there was a lot of opportunities to interact with other people and get story that way and so forth. So as much as Disney tries to tie you down to the itinerary, you don't have to follow that if you don't want to. You really want to immerse yourself. And then there's the story. So it's a very specific, very static story that they do. Everyone experiences the same story. It's sandwiched between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, so it's Disney Star Wars. It's not my Star Wars,
right?
Which is the biggest drawback of Galaxy's Edge entirely. They said the story arcs resemble what Disney had originally intended for Galaxy's Edge, but they never really fully realized it because there was too many people.
Right.
You could not cater that kind of personalized story to everyone.
Okay.
The Star Cruiser is really their second chance to do that, and by all accounts, they're doing a much better job of it here, but it's costing you.
Right.
They couldn't be more complimentary for the performers, whether it's the cast members you interact with, the actual performers at the dinner show. They said they were fantastic. That alone was worth going just because of the professionalism of there.
Okay.
The one complaint that they had from a story standpoint is for being in a Star Wars galaxy far, far away, apparently there's an overall lack of two things you'd expect in that universe. Droids and aliens. So there was like one astromech droid that was going around the ship, and that was it. Couple of people that were done up as aliens, not very many at all, but they were lead characters, so you weren't bumping into people in the hallway and stuff like that. So they said that kind of killed the effect of it being in an alien world.
Okay.
And of course, no Disney experience is complete without a gift shop, right?
Yep.
So there's two chances that Disney can wring a little bit more money out of you on this one. So you have the Chandrila Collection, which is a small shop on board. That's targeted more for buying things to fit in.
Yes,
clothing and stuff like that.
And some collectibles, because again, my friend had posted the photo. So again,
non-branded collectibles.
Non-branded collectible, like there was some glassware, jewelry, clothing, things that you would expect at a high-end boutique.
Right.
That was what.
Now, you can buy the more tchotchke style stuff on your excursion to Batuu. There's a pop-up shop that's in the little kiosk area that you board the shuttle and get off the shuttle, the U-Haul. And you could buy Star Cruiser specific stuff there and some of the bragging rights stuff there, but they don't overwhelm you, which is what really kind of blew me away.
Right.
And then finally we come down to the price. So is the $4,809 for the standard room worth it? One person who attended on a complimentary pass doesn't think so. And they were there for free, mind you. Okay?
Right.
After seeing what I've seen and reading what I've read, I have to agree. Disney's non-existent cruise to nowhere at an astronomical price is a big ask. But it's also in line with what seems to be their new target audience of 1%ers that Disney appears to be aiming for. So short of hitting the lottery or getting a complimentary trip myself, I'll be avoiding this particular Disney money trap. So, I don't know. What do you think? You think it's worth it as a once-in-a-lifetime? You know, you turn 50, we're going to go on that'll be our Disney cruise. I don't think that's the
I think if I had my choice of 2 days doing that or going to Disneyland Paris for the same amount of money, I would choose Disneyland Paris.
Yeah.
You know, as much of knowing how much of a Star Wars family we are, for half the price.
See, not only can I not justify paying that money for that limited an experience, I refuse to support what really is Disney slap in the face to every Star Wars fan out there.
Right.
Because your average Star Wars fan is not going to be able to afford this.
Right.
And you're deliberately pricing out that entire fan base.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you slash that price, and that was even when we were still DVC members, there was the option of, okay, how much of points do we, and for the amount of points that we were going to have to use versus taking a 7-day cruise, it was just, it didn't equal. There was no comparison to either or. So I would rather spend $5,000 and go to Paris than just stay. Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
So it's been described as the Gone with the Wind of gangster movies. It was cutting edge when it was originally released and still to this day stands the test of time. The movie that made us an offer we couldn't refuse, The Godfather, has turned 50. It's also returning in limited theaters to mark its epic anniversary, and many of the stars of the movies have shared their thoughts on its legacy. What are your thoughts on The Godfather? When did you see it? How old were you when you saw it?
Oh, gosh. Well, I was probably too young when I first saw it, but then probably didn't see it again until probably high school.
That's when I saw it. I saw it in high school.
And when I was in high school, that was actually when Godfather 3 came out. And I remember in our one English class, we had been talking about it. So there were a couple of us that actually went to go see the third one because we were talking about the impact of the first one. And really, when you think about it, it was kind of the start of, there had been gangster movies all, throughout, cinema.
Mm-hmm.
But really, that was kind of the one that led the way for, some of the more modern gangster movies. Like, they kind of look at that and kind of go from there.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because in a recent interview, Talia Shire described her brother, Francis Ford Coppola, characterizing the movie as a waltz. She says the endless cycle of the family had a sense of a waltz to it. And it's hard to argue with that. It really, it did have that. And I think that's really what scared the studios more than anything because it was so different than the gangster movies you had up to that point.
Right. Everything was family.
Yeah.
Really. It was all about taking care of the family.
It was a huge gamble for Paramount. And by most accounts, the movie was held a shoot for Coppola. They said there were reports of a running battle between Coppola and his bosses at Paramount, and even the crew at times because of creative differences. Casting decisions, they brought Marlon Brando in, who at that point in time was kind of obscure at that point in his career. Nobody wanted to touch him at that point.
Right.
And it kind of reinvigorated his career.
Yeah, yeah.
They said that Coppola was in constant fear of getting sacked by Paramount during this whole thing. Even in post-production, when he made his choice of Italian maestro Nino Rota, that was questioned. Coppola bluffed by threatening to have his name removed from the movie before Paramount finally gave in to his decision.
Wow.
So there was this constant strife that he was running into with this movie. And in the interview with Talia Shire, she says, I wouldn't have had me on the set. She said the last thing he needed was his sister at the time.
Yeah, true.
I added one more tension for him.
Yeah, exactly. Thinking about that.
If you think back to the movie where there's the scene where she and her new husband are fighting and she's pregnant in the scene, she says, it's a rough thing to see a pregnant woman being knocked around.
Right.
She says, I had to move from place to place and I was terrified because you didn't want to do another take because another take meant everything had to be reset. She says, I just want to keep going. Because it would have cost money to do the resets and the reshoots and all that stuff. So, yeah, even when it was being made, it was such a different movie. Well, even the novel itself. The novel was written in the 60s and was a huge hit, which is why it spawned the movie.
Right.
But it was so different than like the Cagney-style gangster movies that you were used to.
Right.
And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was very reflective of our country at that time.
Yeah.
The power struggles, the politics, do whatever it is you need to do. And it came out in some of the quotes. You got some of the best one-liners. I wrote a couple of these down.
Yeah.
There's one line where Michael Corleone says, "Don't ask me don't ask me about my business, Kay." Even before Fight Club, which we don't talk about that either.
Right.
It set the precedent on how you handle things that people don't want to know the truth about.
Right.
You may ask about it, but don't ask me about it. Take the gun,
leave the cannoli.
Some might say these are words to live by. For me, it's the first line out of my mouth whenever I walk into a bakery.
Yep, it is.
And then you have the really personal lines like, I know it was you, Frito, you broke my heart.
Yep.
If you're looking for the most poetically perfect way to tell your brother his secret, you couldn't ask for a better line.
Yeah.
Revenge is a dish best served cold. While it's attributed as an old Klingon proverb, the Klingons probably got it from this movie.
Yeah.
And the one that I think really kind of speaks to why the movie had such an impact was very early on in the movie. Don Corleone says, I believe in America. And he does.
Right.
But it's his version of America.
Right.
And in our current state of political upheaval, this line's incredibly poignant and tells us that America's what you make of it. If you're America, is gun to your head, going to take your money if you don't do what I say, make demands, then that's your America.
Mm-hmm.
That's not everybody else's America. So it's that distorted, that ability to distort things in such a way
to be how you want it to be.
Right, to make yourself feel good about it.
Yeah.
And then, the most famous line from the whole movie, and yes, this line is so well delivered and so perfect in the movie that it appears twice in our breakdown here. 50 years later, people dream of a chance to use the line any chance they get, and that is, I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. And that's like, everyone knows where that line comes from. They know who said it, and it's fantastic. But culturally, though, I mean, we talk about the careers and the impact and stuff like that. It was a self-reflective look at the country during some of our most formative years that the movie portrays. And it's a shining example of how certain aspects of the population exploited their opportunities. They bent, broke, bought, and rewrote the rules of the land to their favor. And it still happens to this day. Whether it's happening in business or politics or crime or whatever, what Don Corleone represented in the movie is what so many people aspire to. That power, that ultimate power, that ability to manipulate things and be in control. And so many fortunes in today's businesses have been made on that. It's not biographical, it's not historical, but there are grains of truth in the film that make us question reality and kind of look at the world differently. And we've never gone back to the way it was before Godfather. That kind of opened our eyes to a reality that a lot of people didn't want to ask about, I think.
And I think what's also interesting is it's probably one of the top movies of all time, and Godfather 2 is revered also as one of the best movies that, normally sequels, after you do the first one, they kind of go downhill from that.
Yeah.
But, Godfather 2 kind of stands alone, on its own as being a really great movie. And it's interesting because it's a prequel to The Godfather. So you kind of see everything.
And that concept itself was interesting at the time because you didn't have that sort of thing.
Right.
Where it's like, okay, we drew the line in the sand. Now let's go back and show you how we got to that line.
Right. Where normally you never did that. You always went forward.
Right.
So it was an interesting, take on it. And it was so well received on top of the success of the original.
Absolutely. And I have little doubt The Godfather will still be relevant 50 years from now, too.
Yep.
So we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll get some of our afterthoughts to cover.
Sure.
So what do we have for our afterthoughts?
So going on, fortunately, if you're watching us live... and not on, after the fact, ZoloCon is going on this weekend. It's going until 6 o'clock, so if you're in the area, you got until 6 today. Tomorrow it'll be from 9 to 4:30. We're actually planning to be there tomorrow for it. That's in Warminster, Pennsylvania. Then in a couple of weeks after that, we have the Delaware Train Show and the April Fool's Toy Show. That would be April 2nd and April 3rd, and that is in Newcastle, Delaware at the Nurstrine Center.
And before we go, we did attend...
T-shirts or sweatshirts and things.
And we had the one artist that was there who was the taxidermist artist that we talked to. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was kind of interesting. I almost came home with a bat.
A real bat that was taxidermied.
Bat that was taxidermied in this cute little cage. So we were talking to him, and you had asked him how he came to...
how he sourced his critters.
And what was it? So he kind of had a...
So he said he has a license. He's a licensed scavenger.
Right.
Which I didn't even know that existed. But he said most of the stuff that he gets comes from people that he works with.
Right, they kind of trade things.
Right, so they'll send him the, for lack of a better word, carcasses.
Right.
He'll taxidermy them. Was it his son or his nephew?
His
nephew does the actual settings and the
dioramas
and stuff like
that.
Right. And he'll set the taxidermy animals in here, and he'll send some of these back to these people that provide the materials for it. And it's really cool. Not only did they do the bats in the cages, they did these incredibly ornate ostrich eggs.
Yes.
Because the person who runs it is a former dentist. He uses dental tools to actually go in there and carve these out. Talking about no additional material added to it. He just takes the egg, carves it out, and you had three-dimensional renderings of
a dragon.
Dragons coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible the kind of detail the guy had.
Yeah.
First time I think we'd seen that vendor, and he's a local guy too, which is nice.
Right. So he actually is going to be at some of the other local, he'll be at Monster Mania, which is coming up in a couple of months, and then another one that's up in Parsippany, MonsterCon, I think it was.
Right, the next horror one up there.
Yeah, so yeah.
It was interesting. It was a kind of a cool venue the way they laid it out. It was small.
Right, it wasn't very big, but
you had a lot of vendors for such a small area. But it was laid out in such a way that you didn't feel claustrophobic in there, which was nice.
Right, because they had the one banquet room set up with the doors open, but then they had vendors throughout the lobby area as well.
Of the lobby. Yeah. So, it was cool. I certainly, for the price, you can't beat, $5 to get in there and look around and stuff. So it's probably one that we'll wind up going to again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was Nerd Fest last weekend.
Yeah.
And I think that was all we had. Before we do go, though, I do want to invite you to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions listed as Insights into Entertainment. You can also find video and audio versions listed under Insights into Things. We're available on Pandora, Castro, Stitcher, Podbean, Buzzsprout, and so forth. I would also invite you to write into us, give us your feedback, tell us how the new format of the show works. We're curious if this works better than what we were doing before. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You
can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/insightsintothings.
You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast.
You can find us on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings.
And you can find all that and more on our official website at insightsintothings.com. That's it. Another one in the books.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.